Right. What happened last time? Let's see, there was Amateur Hour for Detectives, and before that, let's see. Oh yes, the Refraction Railway. After dealing with the trials of the case of time-killing time, and the fourth Refraction Railway line, which included the introduction of the Envy Peccatula, the monstrous versions of dittos that can turn into any identity, gaining access to their abilities and the EGO that they can wield, but without their personality. They had a wait before they arrived at the warp train station. After they were on the warp train, Dante wanted to recall how their situation happened. They were boarding a warp train to get to their next destination, District 16, run by P-Corps. They got into their first-class flash-freeze hibernation capsules, and it was supposed to feel as if nothing happened and they'd be there, but Faust woke them up, hinting that things didn't go according to their expectations. Dante assumed that Faust was there to wake them up after they arrived. But Faust, considering that she went into hibernation after they did, Dante was able to realize that they had woken up mid-transit. They were now stranded in an unknown dimension. Faust was understanding of Dante's disorientation. Dante wanted to know what happened. But before they could find out, they needed to remind themselves of how this started. A few days before this, we head back to the end of time-killing time, when Virgilius announced that they were going on the warp train. This surprised Dante. They were still perplexed by what happened in District 20. And while it seemed a good idea to clear the air by asking Virgilius where they were going next, it backfired. This unnerved Don Quixote, thinking that she must have misheard. Virgilius assured her that she didn't. They're heading to the warp train station of that district. Don Quixote assumed that they needed to deal with something there. Gregor asked if they had distortion problems at one of the platforms. Virgilius noted that they were less likely now to disagree to taking side jobs, but it's not that. Not this time. They're going there to get to District 16. Yes, they're going to 16, and that's it. Yeah, it's something simple for once. Heading there to go to District 16 much quicker than if they drove there through places that they've already been and places unrelated to where they were going. The dumbfounded shock was understandable to Dante, not just because of that, but because while the Damned League have no history of employment within W Corps, this made Dante nervously ask if they are actually taking that train. While knowing from the vague information gathered from identities, they had enough knowledge about the terrible secrets of the warp trains, how they operated. They initially considered hiding this with the others. They found that it was more helpful to share this information and let them give their own opinions in more recent times. Yisang had very dim recollections, while he used the W Corp identity. Masol, based on the conversational records between Dante and the identities, along with the knowledge of the mechanisms of the warp train's operations, they're seen as bizarre and inefficient to him. No. While economy class are subject to centuries of isolation and torment, first class is in hibernation for the whole journey. Hong Lu recalls that it's a 10-second trip that actually takes a long time, and when the train arrives at the destination, the memories of the passengers are wiped. Actually, it's more like they load a save state of when they first started the journey. Sinclair then said that he heard that the passengers get so tired and weary that they start tearing each other apart. Ryushi was looking forward to seeing a masterpiece by her own twisted standards. Dante was not comfortable with that statement. Then we find out from Dante that the identity's memories, or beliefs, don't bleed into the originals. Certainly not once they're done using them. According to Faust, this was due to the risks associated with embracing such influences. A filtering process was intentional to block them from reaching those that use them. It's why, for example, Ishmael can use the Captain Ishmael identity, an identity where she and Ahab have a role reversal, where she was a psychotic captain, without being taken over by the viewpoint of said identity. Sadly, they can't retain new information that each identity has to offer. It's why Dante keeps a record of important things about them and sometimes shares it with the others. Dante told them that their voice doesn't carry that well past the window. Most communications are one-sided, but Dante by this point has a number of W-Corp identities. Yes, at this point in the story, 7 at most. So he used them to piece together how the warp trains actually operated. But he observed Virgilius and realized that it might have been better not to know that. Thankfully, Faust planned ahead, due to their alarmed response and possible refusal to go on said warp train. Don Quixote was surprised that she knew from the start. So why didn't she tell her? She confirmed that she knew, as nothing was beyond her reach. She already had a solution to this. Ishmael doubted that the solution was not getting on the warp train, asking what was it. Well, the journey would take a few months by driving there, and I doubt that Project Moon will annoy us all with either filler content or a time skip of that duration. Sinclair was more concerned about Mephistopheles, doubting that it could fit inside a train car. And Charon had a problem with that as well, as no one would be there to feed Mephi. Virgilius wanted Faust to explain what the plan was. Faust did so, telling them that the rearmost tall cars of the warp trains are all freight cars. That's where Mephistopheles would be safely fastened and transported. Well, they need that to get around once they're at District 16. As for them, they're going first class. This surprised all of them. Heathcliff didn't believe that he'd be on a seat for the pompous toffs. As even on normal trains, and yes, there are normal trains that work on a more local level. Warp trains are the equivalent of airliners, where some see it as their proudest achievement to plant their on first-class seats, while others cram themselves into freight cars because they couldn't even afford economy class. Sinclair told him to not look at him. He's never been in first class before on any train. Rodio remarks that a single first-class warp train ticket is 3 to 4 months' salary for a first-year wing employee, questioning if their budget can handle getting tickets for all of them. According to Faust, it can. Gregor heard that first-class passengers have some cool bonus stuff, like personalized private capsules. Faust told him that it's the promotional language that describes the flash freeze hibernation capsules. they'd last long enough to keep them from knowing the nightmare of the warp train journey. Yi Sang noted that Limbus Company's regard for their well-being was unfamiliar, yet it was welcome. It wasn't often that expense was spared for their comforts. Roger was expecting that they'd just put Virgilius and Charon into first class and put the rest of them into economy class. Otis saw this as an unnecessary luxury, saying that they should have saved the budget and put only Dante and Otis into first-class seats. Then Ishmael reminded them that they need to use it to get to where they're going next, considering the unique nature of the warp train, and prepare accordingly. Sinclair considered them creepy regardless, knowing that she won't be worried about. Ishmael knew that economy-class passengers will have a hard time getting into first class, if they even attempt to open the door to it. The door was quite durable. Well, not unless they were powerful enough distortion, like Jae-hyun, the puppeteer, or Elena, the blood-red knights. They seemed to be able to get into first class quite easily. And this was considering that she was reading the promotional pamphlets. She added that they won't need to do anything. They just need to board it, get into their capsules, shut their eyes, and by the time they wake up, they're there. She heard that they used to give up commemorative merchandise before their finances went in the gutter, likely due to the loss of the immense power supply of Lobotomy Corporation after the White Nights and Dark Days, and they were forced to make cutbacks. Not to mention the bad press due to Jae-hyun and Elena's their antics there. This did not make Sinclair feel less nervous. Don Quixote saw that a true adventure was one that was not without its hardships. Yes, even they can't venture without respite. On rare occasions, even a hero chooses to select a first-class seat in the place of a quaint inn. Dante noted that there was at least some interest in the first-class warp train seats, where it might be acceptable if they ride in first class. Mesant made it clear that he would board the train if he must. Ryushu, however, was disappointed by being in first class, asking if she had to. She wanted the scenic route of economy. She saw it as more fun. Virgilius pretended not to hear her. Just as well, she needs little encouragement. Virgilius then assumed that they're all in agreement and then announced that they'd go there. Don Quixote has one more concern, a matter of great importance to her. Heathcliff told her to get on with it. This hesitance isn't like her. She carefully spoke, almost whispering in a low voice. She said that in the first-class seats, she's heard that they must board with their feet freed from their boots. Was that true? Roger was a little annoyed. Where was this nonsense gossip coming from this time? Don Quixote denied this. She overheard this from those they walked past them that day. When one of them asked, "You know that you gotta go barefoot in first class, right?" The other replied, "Of course, man. What am I, stupid?" She then asked Ishmael if that was true. Ishmael didn't know. She's never travelled by warp train. She consulted the pamphlet just to be sure. Don Quixote didn't want to be separated from Rocinante. To not toss Rocinante to the side next to the ugly shoes of Heathcliff. Ooh, he had to say that within hearing range, and he was not happy about that. Don Quixote begged Virgilius to allow her to board with Rocinante. Virgilius usually responded with an exasperated rebuff, but the tone was more serious, yet still annoyed. He let her keep her shoes on. Is there something that he knows that the others don't? A few days later, they arrived at the T-Corp warp train station, which Dante remarked as huge. It was clear that the warp train station left that kind of impression. Don Quixote was more excited by the appearance of it, shouting vibrantly at this, no longer feeling apprehension due to the fear of being separated from Rocinante. Dante asked if each nest was... well, it had one of these massive structures in them. Heathcliff had nothing. So he asked Masson if he knew anything about what they were saying. Masson, in his usual autistic manner, explained that every warp train station had been built with a general design philosophy that drew from their respective nests' architectural idiosyncrasies. It can also be said that critics in relevant fields praise the warp train stations as one of the many cultural cornerstones of the city. In simpler terms, each warp train station had a basic template but had aesthetics that matched the nest that it's in, which in the case of District 20 involved clockwork and a steampunk aesthetic. Sorry, English failed me there. Briefly. Dante noticed that Heathcliff was treating Masson like a walking encyclopedia, although it's no guarantee that he'd be able to understand most of what he was saying. Then Don Quixote caught Masson's attention, asking if the passenger that she observed was from the west of the city. He said that he wasn't, as it's fashionable to wear leather and metal armor in the west. The clothing observed seemed to be from those from the north and the south, with elements from the east, rarely seen in the west. Don Quixote asked him to slow down. She needed to make a record for her lectures, asking him about the fashion of the north. She read in a magazine that they wear puffy, loose-fitting outfits, which is understandable considering that it's a colder climate there. Well, why not ask Rodia then? She's from District 25. That's in the north. Oh, seriously, have you forgotten about that, Don Quixote? Masson told her that a first-hand impression was ahead of her. She was briefly silent as she examined this traveller. Then she shouted a cry which made the prosthetic-bodied traveller scream. 3 seconds of a screaming duet happened then. Don Quixote's due to fascination, the other due to unmitigated frustration. The 4-armed prosthetic, using Traveller, remarked that she nearly blew out his eardrums. Heathcliff was angered, saying that he's the one to talk. The Traveller mentioned that he had an audio... I need to get better at English. He had an audible frequency range expansion implant in his eardrums, telling them to get out of his way. They're blocking the walkway like a ragtag band of hicks who's never seen a warp train before. Well, they've never seen a warp train before, but only Heathcliff is the hick there. He then complained that he took the train all the way there for an expedition, only to lose his targets. Then those fools were trying to blow his eardrums, making his already bad day worse. That's basically how Virgilius feels when dealing with the damned dozen on a daily basis. Rodia was nervous, as it was that obvious that they'd never been on a warp train before. Apparently the round trip for the traveller was at his expense. He was swinging his arms out of frustration, as if he was Goro after losing a match in Mortal Kombat and not receiving a fatality. Gregor tried to calm him down, as someone might get seriously hurt. As if it keeps swinging its arms around, while each is holding a weapon. Don Quixote did nothing to calm the situation, as she asked the traveller to stand still for a moment to satisfy a few inquiries regarding his outfits, to stand still for 5 minutes. This continued to him off. This fixer spent a few minutes venting out several grievances at them before storming off to a different platform. Don Quixote was subdued, considering that fixer having an odd personality. Look in the mirror, you blonde lunatic! Have you observed your own actions since the journey started? Ishmael even noticed that the fixer was thinking the same thing. Sinclair suspected that a lot of people in the city had full-body prosthetics. Well, you'd know about that, Sinclair. Your family owned a factory that made them, that had a contract with P-Corp, and your family fully replaced their own bodies. Then N-Corp's Psycho Division murdered them. At that point, Virgilius walked up to them, telling them that they'll meet at their destination. Don Quixote asked if he's not riding alongside them. Yeah, it turned out that since an incident involving a colour fixer in the past, somehow getting onto economy class and teaching the passengers how to fight, requiring the Rabbit team to be hired to pacify the passengers, W Corp policy had changed. Whereas before, colour fixers were required to go into first class, now colour fixers needed to board a train specifically prepared for them, to prevent that kind of incident from happening again. Roger called this First Class Plus. Ishmael saw this as special treatment from the wings, due to him being a colour fixer. Yeah, it's more than that, Ishmael. Charon complained that she's not with Mephi. He'll be lonely. Virgilius told her 3 separate times, each time he bought her candies. Likely sour ones, if that hasn't changed about her. People aren't allowed aboard the freight cars. He then addressed Faust, who paid attention to this. They had an understanding of what was going to happen, and he left with Charon, who was clearly going with him. Faust then led Dante and the others to where their train was, specifically to the first class car, which based on the Otis W Corp identity, first class cars have been cut back, after the incident with Jaehyun and Elena, which would likely raise the price for the first class tickets. I mean, on top of the price rise with the lack of power after the fall of the Lobotomy Corporation. Wouldn't put it past them. Gregor was impressed by first class, and Roger noticed that their colours were coming back. Clearly something about the warp train protected the inside from the colour draining. Don Quixote was excited by this sight. Roger, typically thinking with her stomach, immediately brought her attention to the complimentary food and drink of the first-class seats, understanding that it would be included with the insane pricing. Dante noted the expensive-looking, sizable capsules. Flash freeze hibernation, literally freezing their bodies. Dante then asked if they were safe. Faust wanted Dante to make it clear what their definition of safe is. Dante spoke of them supposedly freezing them solid. Can they come back from that? Apparently, it put them in a temporary state of death caused by rapid cellular cryopreservation process, the rapidity preventing cell damage during the freezing. Usually, this wouldn't be a problem. That model has fully resolved cell membrane breaching issues caused by cryogenic density charge or by ice crystal growths of hydrogen molecules. Well, that's how Faust put it. And considering that Dante was the intellectual equivalent of a village idiot, at least compared to Faust, they missed half of that, but understood that she was saying that it was safe. Faust told them that, as far as she was aware, it is. But even if an issue was to arise, everyone will be reverted to their states at the start of the journey, when they arrived at their destination. No lasting complications will occur. Heathcliff found this ridiculous. She had a talent for dragging it out, when a simple, "Yeah, it's safe," would have been enough. Faust confirmed this, as her talents weren't limited to a singular field. Dante was silent at this. Clearly satire was lost on her. And they were still worried. The way she answered that was odd. Dante asked Faust if it can go wrong. Faust responded that she didn't err, but then again she wasn't a divine being. Some information. She doesn't exactly have access to that yet. Although she speaks the facts, they might not always align with the truth. Dante understood this. Gregor then spoke of why they're called first-class seats. District 16 is the northernmost corner of the city. But they'll be getting there in practically no time at all. Don Quixote excitedly tells Rocinante to prepare for a long jaunt. Roger then asked Don Quixote, "Does she ever wash those shoes?" Dante wanted to know what she meant by that. Roger reminded them of when they were inside of the pallid whale, when the whale blew up and they were covered in slimy whale juices. They were all over their clothes, their shoes, everything. Ishmael was reminded of that. They had to scrub a lot to get that bloody, fishy, fleshy gunk out of them. Ishmael didn't want to remind herself of that nightmare. Roger then reminded them that Don Quixote never took her shoes off once during that whole ordeal. Ishmael agreed that they do look a bit fishy. Don Quixote then asked them if they've ever witnessed an errant knight who would leave the side of their beloved steed. Gregor can't say that he's encountered a knight before. She told him that he'll know, starting now. He should remember this well. Lourdes was annoyed that they don't spare them even a moment of quiet. Hong Lu asked her if she's been on one of those. Apparently, she's been treated to similar premium VIP seats in the past. She then suddenly asked a question to Faust, asking if no accident has ever occurred in those first-class cars. And Faust refused to share this in order to prevent cases of unnecessary anxiety and misgivings. Yeah. Just as well that she doesn't give the full details. Such as the case when Jae Hyun, the puppeteer, broke into first class and turned the passengers into puppets, while Elena was dealing with the inhabitants of Lovetown. Well, regardless, this was far from reassuring for Otis. A beep occurred, which told Ishmael that they'll be leaving soon. Then an announcement occurred when it was said that the warp train PW-612, bound for P-Corps, was about to end its boarding period. This made the others more busy. Faust told them to enter their capsules. Dante was struggling to do theirs, while the others did so without any difficulties. Faust asked if it was anxiety. Dante suspected so. Then the announcer notified the train that warp would be initiated in 10 minutes. Faust assisted them, telling them to stand as though they're leaning back, and she guided them into their capsule as though she did this before. Then pressed the button inside the capsule that closed the hatch. She told them not to worry too much, they'll meet again in but a moment. Dante thought that they heard a brief sigh, but the hatch shut before they could ask her anything. Then the announcer notified that they're initiating warp, telling the economy passengers to confirm that their seatbelts are firmly fastened. The last thing that they saw before gas filled their capsule was Faust climbing into her own, opposite theirs. They had no idea what she really meant by, "We will meet again in but a moment." Then we get back to when Faust woke Dante up and they would understand that something had gone wrong. Dante remarks that they're there already, seeing W Corp's marketing department as not exaggerating. Faust's expression was, as usual, making this unclear, which was why it didn't hit them initially that something was wrong. Faust told them that they weren't there, and this confused Dante. After Dante's brain had rebooted, and they had time to process this, they looked up at her face. Her expression was noticeably different, hinting that this was truly the case. Dante was asking if the train was still running. Faust confirmed this. Dante asked where they were. Faust told them that they're currently stranded in an unidentified dimension, coordinates unknown. Dante was taking this surprisingly well, considering the sheer horror of the numerous implications in that dryly delivered sentence. They were about to suffer the very thing that Dante was worried about. Dante understood and appeared relatively calm, considering this, believing that this was part of Faust's plan, that she'll explain every part of her plan to help them out of this situation. They asked her about this. The unusually long silence was concerning for Faust. Dante certainly noticed that. And Faust told them that they're half right and half wrong. Faust left them with that chaotic stream of vaguely terrifying information as she woke the others up. Gregor was amazed by them being there already. Faust told them that they weren't. Roger was cheerful at being there already. Faust told them that they weren't. Sinclair said that they were there already, and just as he was about to say that they had nothing to worry about, Faust told him no. And before Yi Sang could say anything, Faust said no, making Yi Sang feel awkward as he didn't say anything. After they got their colours back, and then given a flat-toned explanation of their problem, and then a long, loaded silence, which was played out on 10 separate occasions, Faust understood Dante's confusion, but she elaborated on the current circumstance because of that. And now we're back to the present. Ishmael understood it as this: the train is still running, and Heathcliff added to that by saying that they're drifting into, well, in some unknown dimension. Don Quixote saw this as quite dramatic. Gregor asked if Faust knew this would happen. Faust confirmed this, and this was frustrating to Ishmael. Gregor asking what's wrong with Faust. The anger of the others was clear. This wasn't the first time that Faust and Virgilius intentionally and knowingly kept certain details about events on their journey. Gregor asking if she's insane. They can't just retreat or jump out of the door when hits the fan. Massault advised against that, as he'd be immediately destroyed. Clearly, this dimension that they were in was quite hazardous to their kind of life. Rodia asked Faust if she had a plan, like she always did. And Rodia wanted Faust to confirm this. Faust was unusually slow to respond. Even Heathcliff noticed that she looked out of it that day. She gave a sideways glance. She didn't want to discuss this in front of the others. Dante told them to hold on, understanding that the lack of communication was harming their trust in Faust. Dante was asking what the situation was from the start, and they understood that they needed to regain control of the situation, as this could harm their trust in Faust permanently, if it's not dealt with delicately. Dante at least understood even, that Faust didn't wake them up in the middle of a trip just to spite them. Faust needed to tell them what happened, so that they can figure the problem out and deal with it. Dante told Faust to tell them what's going on, all of it, in a way that they can understand, while telling the others to hear her out. Ishmael was willing to go along with it, and Heathcliff understood that going out of control will not help the situation. Faust thanked them for this. After some time, the cause of the issue was a contract, and decision from the higher-ups of Limbus Company. Their reputation preceded them, and they decided to contact Limbus Company with a let's just say it involved a contract for dealing with a mysterious repeated series of incidents suspected to have been caused by distortion, specifically finding out what caused it and dealing with it. Where after multiple failed attempts to resolve it on their own, if it didn't pose a problem for W Corps, at least based on the available information, they'd have neutralized this threat when they arrived at their destination, and the transformed would have been reverted into human forms. But the real issue here was that passengers were disappearing. Don Quixote saw this as impossible for passengers to be spirited away. Well, that's what they're there to figure out. At least according to Faust. And Dante asked Faust if W Corp shared anything to at least get them started. Faust noted that it was the most prominent cause of the misunderstanding. W Corp refused to share anything about the trains themselves, as they were concerned about maintaining the secrets of their singularity. It's why they chose an upstart business like Limbus Company to deal with this. They wouldn't even know where to start if they didn't have access to the information that the identity cards had to offer. Then Faust produced a keycard with the W Corp logo, explaining that she had a master keycard, which allowed her to open and close the hibernation capsules. They can return there once they're done. Heathcliff was starting to think that all the wings were insane. Honglu thought that it was unkind to be asked to finish the puzzle without all the important pieces. At least Chief Executive Director Hubert of T-Corp was with them to assist them. And he explained many new things to them. Well, he was the hands-on managerial type. Sinclair noted that she had her hands tied, and as a result that they were more understanding of Faust after this. Gregor told her that it would have been nice if she at least gave them a hint. Ishmael understood that, well, where she was going with that. But it's not like someone out there was monitoring her every move and every word. Yeah, about that, Ishmael. They could find that out in the highlight reel that they can view that records the times when there's the most action. Yes, Faust certainly implied that. But Ishmael at that point gave up. She wasn't wanting to let go without saying what she wanted to say. She told them next time... Yes, Faust told them next time that she'll take their inputs into account. Dante was silent at this. They did all that they could do for her, trying to do damage control after their disappointment in her. Dante was sure that she had a variety of backup plans to help them. Aurotis asked, well, she asked what's next? Rodia was willing to get on with it, as they weren't going to rot inside there for thousands of years. But before that, Faust had something to discuss with Dante, who noted that this was unlike Faust. They asked, what were they discussing? Faust told them to continue at a lower volume. Dante asked why she was whispering. This was making Dante feel less secure. Apparently her connection to Gesellschaft, or more specifically to the Faust network, has been severed, which confused Dante. And Faust made it clear to them that she can't access the Faust network's knowledge right now. They understood how much worse it's gotten already. Yes, Faust has access to most of her knowledge through an external source, likely picked up via implants in her head. Well, AI is illegal, so Faust definitely can't be one of those. As far as I'm... okay, let's move on. Yes, her connection was unlikely to have enough range to reach where the warp train was. As for when they received the job, it was sometime between when Virgilius told them they were going on the warp train and their arrival at the warp train station. As when Virgilius told them, they didn't have a job. They were going there to go to District 16, and that was it. But sometime in between, something came up. Dante was unsure of what she meant by that and wanted to know. She meant that she couldn't access the Faust network's input and information. Normally this would be readily available, but at that point it was completely severed. Dante thought that it was because she doesn't have access to that information yet, like what she did during the Walpurgis nights, involving the fairy festival. She can't dismiss that possibility, but this is uncertain. The confidence and methodical expertise was missing at this point. Instead, Dante picked up speculation and doubts, and they wanted to ask, but Faust told them that she's limited to her own knowledge. Dante knew that the situation at that point was much more complicated. Faust didn't know the cause of the disconnection, where it even took into account travel to other worlds, like with Walpurgis nights. But accessing an unidentified dimension like the one that the warp train was in, she was unsure of even this. She didn't know of anything that would sever the connection, not even as they boarded the warp train. This was rather disagreeable. Dante understood that for now it could wait. Dante understood that this changed things. Faust told them not to worry too much because, well, before the capsule's hatch closed. And Dante told her that this was just a minor setback, nothing they can't handle. Yeah, you've dealt with eldritch horrors, morally bankrupt and psychotic individuals, and even a distorted furry version of Heathcliff, so what's a disconnection? Although this was more Dante trying to convince themselves, their job was to keep everyone from self-destructing and pointing them in the right direction. Dante told her that the problem should solve itself once they're off the warp train. And if they run out of options, they'll turn the clock back and see what happens, telling her to not stress herself too much. They still have much to work with. The knowledge that she had specifically, their clock that can invert time, the rest of the damned dozen... Yeah, that's not inspiring a lot of confidence, and Dante knew it. But it was enough for Faust. She understood that being confined to the warp train was stressful enough. She asked them to not tell the others about what she's experiencing, as this would add to that. Meanwhile, Heathcliff understood that wrecking the door wasn't going to do anything. They'll all be dead once it opens. Ishmael was annoyed with him, telling him that he's not even strong enough to break that door open, which says much about Jaehyun and Elena. Sinclair was not liking the prospect of a billion years in that box. Okay, that's stretching it. It's more like a few thousand. Dante saw this as a good idea. Gregor asked if they should take a searching sweep around each car. Faust agreed that they should do this, telling them that approximately 3 days have passed since the departure from District 20, as per the contract made between Limbus Company and W Corp. She had the master keycard that was placed inside her capsule, and the hatch settings were adjusted to open automatically in 3 days. Gregor noticed this. Or rather, noted this. Sinclair didn't feel that much time had passed at all. Faust then reminded them of the fact that there's no way for economy class passengers to enter the first class car. It's why that place remains untouched. Based on what she's been able to figure out and what little W Corp shared, what they need to look into is in economy class. Heathcliff asked if it was part of the warp train where they beat the out of each other, tearing each other apart and making a mess of each other. Ishmael doubted that it would get that bad in 3 days. She saw this as business as usual for W Corp, believing that there's something else happening that isn't. Faust confirmed this. Then she was interrupted by Don Quixote and gestured with her index finger to her lips to be quiet, asking if they hear nothing, as she does on the other side of the door. Past that door must be... And she had a look of horror. She was unsure and asked Faust in a distressed tone. Faust asked Don Quixote to step aside. It was better if she observed it with her own eyes. She produced the master keycard and approached the panel installed next to the door. Heathcliff asked if she was going to open the door. Faust confirmed this, telling him that it was following his usual kind of suggestion. Yes, his suggestion, which was basically saying, "Less talking, more fighting!" Heathcliff had no problem with this, but he thought that this was not like her. She told him that she can't deduce anything without seeing it for herself. She opened the door, and then they saw hideous creatures that charged wildly in their direction. It turns out that Ishmael's belief was wrong on this occasion. And after that, they fought these creatures, which were not open to diplomacy. They seemed to want to make the damned dozen bleed, but they were easily defeated. Yeah, based on the last time a warp train was seen in operation, this is clearly quite different. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!